Nicolas Sharon.
Okay. Well, thanks for the nice and short introduction.
You have slides. I thought it was going to be blackboard.
Yeah,
my writing is really bad. So
And it's measures in geometry. I don't even know if it's geometric measure theory.
Yeah, it is. So I actually realized that it has been 3 or 4 years since my last talk in Hopkins, so I believe it was time that I inflict one more of my talk to the department. Then it will be good for 3 more years.
Can you do it? Can you repeat more slowly?
That's nothing interesting. Okay, so among the different research topics that I've been interested in past years, there I've chosen to really talk about one that has been quite consistent in my research interest, which is broadly speaking looking at interaction between geometry, shape analysis to be more specific, and measure theory. So essentially my goal in this talk is to attempt to convince you that it makes sense to view shapes like curves, like surfaces, polygons, polyhedra, and everything as measures, and more importantly that it gives actually a very effective framework to solve at least some wide variety of problems, both from a mathematical point of view but also from a computational point of view. So I try to present these dual aspects here. So the talk is in really 2 parts, I hope. If I'm not too slow on the first one, I hope I have enough time for the second one. The second part is actually a joint work with Seaway, with right here. And so it's a part which will be about what we did regarding like quite usual problems in shape analysis, like defining metrics between shape, doing diffeomorphic registration, or doing simplification of shapes. So problem that I've been interested for a little while now. The first part of the round, so disclaimer right away, it's a very exploratory at this point. It's something I got interested in the past couple of months, basically. And you will see there will be a lot more open problems and things that I've not been able to solve yet than really things that I've been able at this point to readdress. The reason why I'm talking about it first is that in terms of measure theory, it's actually, I think, more intuitive. The objects are a little easier to grasp than what appears in the second one. In fact, the second one is a generalization of the first notion of measure, at least it's a generalization of the measure that appear here. So okay, I've decided to talk about that first because I think also the problems are fairly intuitive and fairly visual, so it makes sense to start with that, even though it's a bit exploratory. So without further introduction, so let me introduce what we call these length measures for planar curves. So in most of this section, except the last couple of slides, the objects that I'm going to care about are arguably one of the simplest class of shapes that we consider in shape analysis. These are the closed planar curves, so planar curves in 2D, which are closed. So think, for example, of the outline of an object in an image, or it can be the trajectory of a body in the plane that goes back to initial position. So to define that really rigorously, because that's really important for the rest, so this is basically the basic setup. So I'm going to consider the plane, the 2D plane, as a set of complex numbers. It will be very convenient for all the rest of the talk. And I'm going to introduce this set first, this set of parametrized closed curve, which will be the set of all Lipschitz functions from S1 to the plane. Okay, so why the function from S1 from the circle S1 is because we want to have closed curves, so we want to have something that goes back to the initial position. Now, why Lipschitz? So that's going to be a constant in all this talk, is because I want to consider objects which are not only smooth curves, but also curves which can have singularities. So for example, polytopes, polygons, all these type of objects. So set of Lipschitz function is very nice in that regard, because it can model singularity, but still you have a function that is differentiable almost everywhere by Hart-Barrer's theorem. So the set of parameterization that I'm going to introduce is this set C, which is basically a set of Lipschitz immersion from S1 into C. So just a set of Lipschitz maps such that the derivative is non-zero wherever it's defined, so almost everywhere. So for any curve in C, like this in C, I can always introduce the arc length measure. So that I write DSC, so the modulus of C prime d theta. And the tangent map to this curve, which is basically, for every parameter theta, it gives you the unit vector that gives you the orientation of the curve. So where the tangent is, which direction is the tangent pointing. All these things are well defined almost everywhere in S1. So we are not completely there yet, because in shape analysis, what we care about is not parameterization, it's what are the geometric objects that are given by this parameterization. So essentially, one thing we want to do is to identify 2 parameterization which will give you the same shape, same object geometrically. So you can define that a bit formally, it's not so important, I just go quickly over that. If you have 2 parameterization C1 and C2, you want to identify them if they, basically one is a reparametrization of the other one. To be more specific, a positive reparametrization, so we keep the orientation. So that's one thing, and we'll go even one step further. So again, quite a common trait in shape analysis. We want also to identify objects which are just a translation of one another. Okay, so we can always assume that we can translate objects back to a common reference system. So essentially what we define, this is what I will call the shape space of curve, unparameterized curve. It's the quotient of this space C modulo this equivalence relation. Or if you want to say it a bit more simply, it's just the set of geometric curves in the plane which are closed, oriented, and immersed. Modulo translation. So one remark right away is that here I'm not assuming that the curve is not self-intersecting. Okay, so I can have curves which can have as many self-intersections as you want. I'm not assuming simple curves there. So this is just a kind of picture to illustrate what I just said. This is an example of two parameterizations, C1 and C2, will give you the same shape. Okay. One is just a reparametrization plus a translation of the other. So these two things are different in the set C, but they are the same object in the shape space C theta. Okay. So with this basic setup, now let me go to introduce the main object of this section, what I call length measure associated to a planar curve. So the definition is a bit convoluted, but bear with me, I'm really going to try to make it a bit more intuitive. So assume that you take first a parameterized curve in C, what I'm going to call the tangent length measure, or length measure in short. It's going to be a measure, a positive measure on the circle, S1, that is defined as a push forward of the arc length measure by the tangent map. So what does that mean? It means that if you take a Borel set of S1, the measure of this Borel set by this measure mu c, so I write the length measure of the curve by mu c, this is going to be basically the length of a portion of the curve for which all the points have a tangent direction that's pointing in a direction in this set B. So basically this is a measure that gives you the distribution of how much length you have in the different tangent, all possible tangent direction along the curve. So I'll give some example after, I won't try to make this more visual. But one couple point of notice is that in particular, if you take the total measure of S1, then you get the total length of the curve. It's all, you cover all possible tangent direction. So before I comment a bit more on that, just a quick historical note. These measures are not new at all, they are actually very old. They have been introduced originally with a slightly different definition than this, but completely equivalent, by Minkowski and Alexandrov in the early 20th century. So it's even anterior to geometric measure theory. Okay, so before I give example, just a few quick basic comments about this measure. So if you are used a bit to measure theory, there is an alternative way to think about measure, which is instead of writing the measure of a set, you want to see how the measure acts on test function, continuous test function. So in this particular case, if you take any continuous function on S1, this measure mu c, what it does to a function is essentially integrate the function f at this unit vector. So with this unit complex number c prime divided by the roots of c prime, integrated with respect to the arc length measure. So this is a completely equivalent definition to what I just gave before. Now a second comment, which is will be very fundamental for all the rest, is that this measure is completely geometric, in the sense that if you take two equivalent parameterization of a curve, again, reparametrization plus potential translation, this measure is invariant to that. It's just making a change of variable in this expression. You can see very easily that this does not change the length measure. So this is really an object that is not associated to a parameterization, but to a shape, really, to a parameterization modulo the equivalence relation I introduced before. So this is first why it's interesting, is that it's not depending on the parameterization. What can we say else about this measure? There is one property that they all satisfy, which is that if you take the integration of this function exponential I theta with respect to this measure mu c, applying this formula to this function, you find that this is the integral of c prime, and that's equal to 0 because we have a closed curve. So all these measures basically satisfy this sort of expectation condition that the expectation of this function is equal to 0. So if I put these two remarks together, what it shows is that basically this mapping that takes C and associates this measure mu c, it's a well-defined mapping between the shape space, the quotient space, and a set of all measures, positive measures, that satisfy this closure condition. So this is really this mapping that I'll be trying to explore and to understand a bit better in the next slide.
So, Nicolas, so intuitively, are you saying that if I look at any segment of the circle and I look at where it's mapped to, then basically that length of that part is is the measure of this segment?
Actually, this is exactly the example I was going to do in the next case, a polygon example that's really easy to interpret what it means. Just one last comment before I go to that is you can also analyze what is the effect of rotation and scaling on this length measure. In particular, if you rescale a curve by lambda, what you get is simply the measure multiplied by lambda. So it means that if you're a probabilist, you can always rescale your curve to have length 1, and then you can assume that if you want that all your length measure are probability measure on S1. Now, just
that's the definition of a probability.
I would assume so, but yeah. So there, let me go through a couple of examples. In each case, I want to show what kind of length measure we get in these different scenarios. And the first example, I think, which is the most intuitive, is the example of polygonal shape. So think of a piecewise linear parametrization for C. Well, call this all the vertices of this polygon by Z1, Zn. Now, if you remember that basically the length measure is giving you how much length you have in all possible directions in the space for this given curve. Well, what you can see is that the length measure in this case is nothing but just a combination of Dirac masses, where the weight of the Dirac is just the length, so each edge gives you 1 Dirac, and the weight of this Dirac is just the length of the corresponding edge. The angle is just the angle, the phase of this edge, Zj plus 1 minus Dj. Okay, so basically when you are considering polytopes, what you get is length measure that are sum of Diracs, or, if you prefer, cumulative distribution function that are step functions. Okay, so that's Diracs. Now what about density measure? Can we get density measure from length measure? Well, there is an obvious answer, which is yes, if you consider the circle, for example, the parameterization C of theta equals exponential I theta. In that case, the tangent map is just equal to theta itself. And in this case, what you will find is that the tangent measure is just a uniform distribution on S1. Okay, so there you have a density which is equal to 1 everywhere. But now what is interesting is that there are a much larger class of curves for which you can guarantee that they will have a density length measure. And you can connect this density measure to the curvature of the curve, which is basically this case if you have a twice differentiable curve with non-vanishing curvature almost everywhere, and such that the inverse of the curvature is bounded. Then in each of these cases you will get a tangent length measure which is a density of the form rho of theta d theta. And interestingly, this density of this measure is essentially depending on the inverse of the curvature of the curve. So this is a consequence of the co-area formula for those of you that might have recognized this type of expression. It means that basically this density is the sum of the inverse of the curvature of all the points where the tangent is pointing in the direction of theta. So one particular case which will be very relevant for the rest of the talk of that is if the curve is C2 and strictly convex, then the tangent map is bijective, and what you get is exactly that in this case the density of this measure is just 1 over the curvature composed with the inverse of the tangent map. Okay, so this is just a note, but it actually shows a bit of connection between this measure and the geometry of the curve. Now the thing is that, okay, there are other types of measure as well on S1, particularly this exotic Cantor measure, that are neither Diracs but that are not densities, not either densities. And so this is just to show that it's also possible to get tangent length measure which are Cantor measure. So the curve is not very impressive when you look at this, but if you start looking at what is the cumulative distribution function of its length measure, well, what you find is a function like this, which is a Cantor function, in fact, a variant of the Cantor function. So it means that it is possible for curves to have a length measure which can be very singular, like this very odd measure, like a Cantor measure as well. So what all these examples suggest now, it brings the natural question to, if I give any measure in M0, the space M0 I defined before, is it always possible to find a curve that will have that as a length measure? And if it is the case, is there any chance that there is a unique curve that is completely determined by the length measure? So I will answer right away the second of this question, because it's very easy to see that there is no hope for this to be completely injective. So for this mapping to completely characterize the curve, think of that again as an example, a sum of Diracs, 6 Diracs in this case. And first think of each of these Dirac as being one edge, as I did before. So one edge where the length is given by Aj, and the angle of this segment is given by this angle alpha j. As a matter of fact, you can generate already quite a few different polygons, polytopes, that will have this exact same length measure. The way you can do it is that you can reorder the way that you put these different segments with respect to one another. So this is 3 examples of 3 polytopes which all share the exact same length measure. So that's already one way to see that there are lots of curves which have this length measure mu. But it's even more than that.
Question before Avita?
Yeah.
How many are convex in the?
Yeah, that's a coming soon. You read my abstract? Or? No, this is actually very important point, so it's coming after. But you can also divide mass of it, so that's not that there is not even a finite number of these. What you can do is simply say that I'm going to divide these little segments, and then I get a lot more little pieces to play with. and generate a lot more polygons by just rearranging these different things. That's also a polygon that's satisfied as this measure mu as length measure. So okay, so injectivity, if we don't assume anything more on the curve, that's basically hopeless. That's another example with density measure. Same thing, you have 3 different curves that all share the same length measure. But now what's become interesting, as Laurent suggested, so it's in fact pretty intuitive if you think about it, but it's still a fairly remarkable result, is that if you restrict this mapping to convex curve, positive oriented convex curve, so mainly the curve that are the boundary of a convex set, oriented boundary of a convex set, then you have this theorem, which is a particular case of the more general theorem I mentioned at the end, the Minkowski-Fenchel-Jensen theorem, which tells you that this mapping L, if you restrict it to convex shape, it's actually a bijection between the set of all convex shape and the set of all measure in M0. So what it means is that if you take any measure in the space M0, not only you can find a curve that will have this as a length measure, but you can also find a convex curve, and it's the unique positive oriented convex curve that you can find. So it completely characterizes the curve if you restrict to convex shapes, essentially. So, okay, the general proof of that is actually fairly complicated and fairly involved for the general situation, but for curves, when I was working on it, I thought that actually there would be a much more direct proof for that, so I'm just not going to give all the details, but this is one way that you can actually constructively obtain a curve from its length measure. Essentially, you take the curve, you compute its cumulative distribution function, take the pseudo-inverse of the cumulative distribution function, and then basically define the curve as the integral from 0 to theta of this exponential I f mu minus 1s. So there's still some work to do after, but you can prove that this gives you a convex shape for any measure mu. And then you have to prove the uniqueness, which is also a little bit involved, but okay, this can be done in fairly elementary fashion, just using this idea of pseudo-inverse.
Did Minkowski and Fenchel actually even overlap in her ages? I just Googled Fenchel. I think it was born after Minkowski died.
This theorem is a little weird. It's called Minkowski-Fenchel-Jensen. I've seen place where it's called Alexandrov theorem or Minkowski-Alexandrov. So I don't really know, but I've seen it mentioned in the literature. So because there is different parts of it. Some people have just proved injectivity, some people have just proved surjectivity. So I think it's all these things together that you can combine to get this theorem, basically. And one thing that is really nice is that you can even describe this process of constructing the curve from its length measure in a very simple fashion if the measure is discrete. And that's pretty intuitive if you think about it. Essentially what it means is that if you have a measure like that and you want to reconstruct the convex polygon, the unique convex oriented polygon, or positive oriented polygon that corresponds to that, the only thing you have to do is just take the angles, alpha j, order them in ascending order from 0 to pi, and then construct the polygon that just takes this edge one after the other in this particular order. Just saying that essentially for it to be convex, you need the angle to be monotonous in this case. But it's not so trivial to get when you have not non-discrete measure, essentially. So this is just, now if you go back to the set of all curves, not just convex curve, but this basically gives you this kind of picture of the fact that you can partition the whole set of all Lipschitz curve into this set of fibers. So basically you have, for each measure in the space M0, you have a full set of curves that correspond to this measure, but a unique convex one. So typically when you have any curve along this fiber, the unique convex curve that is associated to it is really referred to as the convexification of the curve. Okay, so it's not the same as a convex hull. It's a very different notion. It's another way to convexify a shape based on the length measure, essentially. So before I go, there is a lot more to say about this, so I'm not going to get into that right after, but just one slide which is a little bit of a parenthesis, but it's a problem that came up to me when I was starting working on that, and I'm mentioning it because it's a combinatorial geometry problem. It's not really my field, but I'm throwing it out in case someone will get interested or will find it funny to think about. This is very simple to state there. So if I give you, again, discrete length measure of this form, okay, so of Lk exponential I Fk, and imagine you consider all the polytopes that have n edges corresponding to that measure. So in that case, I'm not trying to split mass, essentially. So each Dirac gives you one edge and only one edge. Then, okay, what's easy to see is that up to translation, you have a total of n minus 1 factorial of these polytopes. You can fix the first segment and then you have all the permutation of the others. And my question is it possible to count number, or at least give interesting bounds on the number of these polytopes which could be real polygons, which are not going to be self-intersecting in the plane? okay, that all share basically this length measure. So among all this fiber and minus 1 mu, how many non-self-intersecting polygons are there in total? So I really have no answer into that. One thing that will be interesting is to understand how this number varies with respect to the way that you define the measure mu. What I just did, and this is really just a minor attempt to just get an idea of what's going on, is I did a simulation, actually a numerical simulation, where I took equidistant angles and equidistant angles. I take constant weight, so this satisfies the closure condition. So this is indeed a well, you have the sum of ELK exponential FIK equals 0. And I simulated all possible or a large number of random polytopes by just reordering basically the edges. And I look at how many, I tested how many of them are actually non-self-intersecting. And the curve you get in polynomial, in a log scale, essentially the curve like that. So I don't know if it's something that's known or not, but you get really this exponential decay in n of the number of non-self-intersecting polygons. So that's the ratio of the number of non-self-intersecting one divided by n minus 1 factorial. So I seem to be this trend, but it's pretty clear, but okay, I have no proof of that, it's just a conjecture at this point. But this depends on the way you define measure mu. There I define a very special case of measure mu. I mean, understanding how this depends on the way that you, the distribution you put on this LK and exponential alpha k, that's a whole harder problem in my opinion.
So Nicola, I'm a bit confused. How do you get this n minus 1 factorial?
Because you
so
have,
there's only one convex, right, by your theory?
Yeah, there is one convex, but there is, if you take n edges,
yes.
so you don't divide, you cannot divide the segment. Yeah. Well, you can, the way that you can obtain a polytope which have this measure is just by rearranging the ordering of these edges. So technically it should be n factorial, but you are doing things up to translation. So you can always assume that the first one, let's say you fix the first one.
But why is it just a permutation? Why can you not have like non-convex shapes that are of different?
No, n minus 1 factorial is a whole number of all the polytopes. Convex one, there is only one,
yes.
always one.
Yes.
N minus 1 factorial is the total number of all the polytopes, including the self-intersecting one, the non-convex one, that you can generate by this process. So like the example I gave before, like this one. These three ones are basically three different examples of polytopes you can generate, which all have the exact same definition.
Okay.
Now so you have this number in total if you don't allow mass division. Okay, but this was a little bit of a digression. So like getting back to the main track of the thing. So going back to this theorem by Minkowski, there is also some very nice additional property of this length measure mapping, which has to do with the Minkowski sum of two sets. So basically, so you can define the Minkowski sum of any two sets, but if you are taking convex sets, the Minkowski sum is still a convex set. You can also rescale this set, so you can define things like the convex combination of two convex sets. And what is quite remarkable, this is very specific to the 2D case, in fact, is that the length measure mapping has an additivity property with respect to this Minkowski combination. So the measure associated to the convex combination of the two sets is the convex combination of the length measure. So there is lots of consequences of that. I'm not going to go through all of them, but even numerically, for example, it gives you a very simple way to compute the Minkowski combination of two given convex sets. The only thing you have to do is you go in the space of measure, you sum the two measures, and then you reconstruct the curve that corresponds to that by the process I explained before. So this is an example of doing that by the Minkowski combination between a triangle and a circle, basically, at for different value of lambda. Okay, so that's a bit anecdotal, but so this length measure, this Minkowski theorem, this fundamental relation we have between convex sets and length measure, I mean, is completely instrumental in the field of convex geometry. So I won't go for all of these things, just focus on the specific problem right after. But okay, it's used a lot in defining mixed areas, study Brun-Minkowski's inequality, and study a lot of isoparametric problems. So from a theoretical perspective, there is a really lot of interest into working with these measures. But okay, as far as I'm concerned for this talk, I'm going to mention one problem that I got caught into and in the end, but was a bit harder than I had expected originally. Okay, which is the following. So we have a unique convex curve in the fiber of all the curves that have a particular length measure mu. So it seems reasonable to imagine that there will be some very specific property of this curve. And one of them that seems pretty natural is that this should maximize the area among all possible curves that you can generate with this particular measure mu. So in other words, my claim is that if you take a measure mu in M0, you take all curves that are in this fiber, all of them. then the convex one, the unique convex one, is going to be the one, going to be one at least, that maximize the sign area among all these curves. So the sign area is defined like that. This is just an extension of area when you can have self-intersecting curve. So if you have a curve that is not self-intersecting, this is the usual area, the positive area, but it can be defined for any curve in particular. So any curves, even self-intersecting one. And so the result is that basically this sign area will be maximized by the convex curves among all the curves in this set. And you can even express what is the area as a function of the length measure. It's given by this kind of expression involving this sign kernel here. So much time do I have? I might go a bit quick on the proof. The proof, I really thought it would be trivial, and I spent quite a while looking for very direct arguments, and I couldn't find it. So really to prove that, you need to work a bit first on the discrete case, work with polygons. So for polygon, it's easy that you can prove this kind of weaker version. If you convexify the polygon, you are going to always increase the sign area. So if you fix the number of edges and you just look at polygon, it's pretty easy to see that if it's not convex, you can always increase the sign area by just doing basically symmetrization, so permuting the ordering of two edges, for example. So for polygons, it's kind of okay. So then the idea of the proof, just to summarize it very quickly, is to do approximation by polygons. So basically you take a maximizing sequence, you approximate each of these elements in the maximizing sequence by a polygon, a polytope. So we have to work a bit on to get that, but it can be, what you can obtain is a sequence of polytopes such that the area is going to converge to the max area, and such that the measure, it's not going to be equal to mu, but at least it will weakly converge to the measure mu. So you have at least this notion of convergence. And then once you are there, basically the idea is to convexify. So you take these polytopes, you convexify them. You don't change the measure, but you increase the area. So you will get basically these properties, and you still get the weak convergence because it's the measures are the same. And there you can use very powerful theorem from convex geometry. That's what the whole idea is, to convert that into a purely convex scenario. In particular, the Blaschke selection theorem. You have a bounded set of polytopes. You can extract from that a subsequence that will converge in Hausdorff distance to a certain curve. That's the first step. And because you have convex curve, this is enough to guarantee that the area is going to converge to the area of C, and the length measure is going to weakly converge to the measure of mu C. These are not trivial theorems at all, but they are well-known theorems in convex analysis. And so that's basically enough. And then once you take all these steps, what you get at the end is that mu C, the area of mu C is going to be greater than A max, so it has to be equal. And its measure is going to be equal to mu. So it shows that it maximizes the area among all these curves. So then the expression of A max is just doing it for polygons first and then generalize it by convergence, by approximating polygons. So just a couple more quick comments about this theorem. So far I've not been able to prove, even though I pretty much put my hand on it, but this is a unique maximizing curve, this convex curve. But the proof is not, so far I've been trying different things, but it doesn't yet completely work out, so this is work in progress. Another comment is that as a byproduct of this theorem, you can find back the standard isoperimetric inequality. And the way to see it, I'll go a bit quick, is that you can rewrite this expression of A max with respect to the Fourier coefficient of the measure. And what you can see is that if you are fixing the length, so fixing the zeroth coefficient of the Fourier coefficient, the zeroth Fourier coefficient of mu, then to maximize the area, essentially you have to take all coefficients except the zeroth one to be 0, and that gives you the uniform distribution mu, which gives you the circle as a curve that maximizes the area. So you find back basically the standard isoperimetric inequality in the plane for a very wide class of objects, in fact. There you go, just considering Lipschitz regularity. Kind of a fun byproduct. I just mentioned this problem because this one has been puzzling me for a long time. It was my initial conjecture before I thought about the area. But there might be even stronger result, which I've not been able to prove, which is that if you restrict to simple curves, so you take a simple curve in this fiber, n-1 mu, then there might be a result which is even stronger, saying that you can, up to a certain translation, you can cover any simple curve by the convex curve, which is stronger than saying that the area is greater, saying that you can really put it inside the convex curve by using a reasonable translation. So there, I've not been able to solve that yet, and I'm not even sure it's true.
So Nicola, about the maximizing curve, you're trying to find, given a measure, value of the measure, you're trying to find the curve that maximizes the area, correct?
Yeah, with a fixed length measure, yeah.
But didn't you just prove that it has to be convex?
No, I proved that the convex is a maximum, but I didn't prove that there are no other maximum but the convex curve. That's what is missing in the theorem. So I'm showing just that it's maximized by the convex curve. Uniqueness is really different, I mean, because the approximation theorem, it doesn't tell you anything about uniqueness. It's just one way to construct a maximum.
And in your simulation, you didn't see any counterexample of
This
the
one?
projector? Yeah.
No, we tried, but it's difficult because sometimes it's very tiny little things. No, I haven't really managed to find any counterexample. There are some if you don't assume a non-self-intersectivity. If you allow self-intersection, then you have counterexamples. So you have to assume that the curve are simple for that to be true. But okay, that's. All right, so let me just conclude this section by saying why I'm trying to head that from there. So this is really a mathematical question, but okay, I come from shape analysis. So besides really the use of these things in convex geometry, I think there are some interesting problems also that are really more related to shape analysis, strictly speaking. So one of them is that in shape analysis, what we want to do is always construct distances between shape. So there one idea, and I'm going to develop that idea in the next part for another type of measure, but it could be to say, okay, if we have a distance on a set of measure, maybe we can induce a distance between convex set from a distance on a set of measure. There have been attempts to do that using LP metrics between densities, for example. But what is a bit frustrating with this type of metric is that if you look at the shortest geodesic path, so look at what are the what does it tell? What are the geodesic in the shape space corresponding to these metrics? They always give you the Minkowski combination of the two convex sets. So, from a shape analysis perspective, it's not necessarily the most obvious way that you will have to deform a convex to another one. So one approach that I'm particularly interested in looking at is if you cannot get more interesting geodesic path, working with optimal transport distances on the space of M0, on the space of measure M0. It's not completely trivial because there are some constraints coming with the definition of M0. You cannot just do pure optimal transport. You have to enforce this closure constraint. So that's one direction I'm interested in. There is also some other direction which is to ask, okay, beyond the case of convex curve, which is nice, but okay, for shape analysis it's not a very wide class of sets, is at least finding out with other type of constraints, is it possible to at least have some local characterization result of a curve through its length measure? So for example, one of my conjectures is that for a fairly large class of curves, if you fix the length measure, you cannot find, it's not true for all curves, but at least for a large amount of them, you cannot find a small deformation of the plane that will preserve the length measure essentially. It's an arbitrary small deformation of the 2D plane that will give you a curve with the same length measure. So this is not yet proven, but I'm starting to have some preliminary result about that. And of course, the last but not least is the extension to larger dimension. So it turns out that, fortunately, there are a lot of things that generalize already to n dimension. The definition of length measure extends to what we call area measure. It's the same idea. There you have, imagine that you have an n-1 dimensional oriented submanifold. With this n-1 volume, what you do is just do the same definition. So take the normal, the map that takes a point and gives a normal vector, and then just do the push forward of the volume measured by this normal map. So it's the same idea, it's measuring the distribution of normal direction, unit normal direction. So it's a measure on Sn-1 in this case. The Minkowski-Fenchel-Jessen theorem generalizes to that. So it essentially tells you that if you have a convex, non-degenerate convex domain, it's uniquely characterized by this area measure. So all that generalizes. So there's already a lot of questions I mentioned that you can formulate in this larger setting as well. I've not done it yet, but at least for example, the isoperimetric inequality should hold as well there. However, it's going to be a surprise, but there are obviously additional difficulties.